I try. So yeah, we had to. There was always some level of technical difficulty we're kind of got to work through. So it wouldn't be the Coffee Sketch podcast. Approaching 200 episodes and still have technical difficulties. So yeah,
Like woe is me, right? Yeah.
I know, right? Yeah, I
Well,
guess yeah.
I will just say that we've switched a couple platforms. I mean, this one's pretty, um, but I'm not so sure. And I will say that, and this is a different critique of platforms, and this is maybe, uh, I hope this lands okay for you as the AI like lover of the group. Um, Riverside's AI is a little bit aggressive.
Oh, and well, okay, meaning
Yeah, it's a little, well, not just aggressive, but aggressive like in a presumptuous way. Like when it's writing, like I don't know what's going on inside its brain, but when it's writing sort of these little prompts that appear next to our episodes, I
oh,
know that that's not Kurt's voice writing that. So we have an aggressive, presumptuous AI who's writing those folks. So if you're
oh,
stumbling on an episode and and then and then listen to us and go, man, that doesn't quite sound like them, you might be onto something. Um,
okay.
and it
Well,
is
I
duly
think
noted.
it's adjustable.
And check back soon. So
It's adjustable. They did make a change on the editing side where that was something that um, uh, is a little different than before. So it might have tweaked a feature, and yeah, the voice of it is yeah, it's maybe not quite Kurt style, the sleepy time Kurt voice, Well, he's got to shake
yeah,
it up a little bit. But
well, I
I
mean,
duly noted, and will
well, I mean,
take that into consideration.
um, well, it starts out with, like, these are not words that Kurt or I usually use. It starts out with buckle up. Literally, that's the first two words. Buckle up
Yeah,
because this episode is raw.
yeah.
Dot dot dot.
The
And it
voice, I'm
doesn't say
telling
dot
you,
dot
yeah.
dot, but yeah.
Yeah, well, yeah. It got your attention, didn't it? And so, therefore,
It's kind of like,
I give you points for
well, I
reading
mean,
the
I
show
mean, it
notes.
got my attention. Yeah. So, yeah, yeah. Okay.
I never read
I
show
mean,
notes of anybody. Maybe,
just
well,
one,
rarely.
including your AIs. Yeah.
Well, of course, yeah, right. Because I assume that nobody reads the show notes except for Jamie. So I've not been approached by anybody else's commentary on the show notes except for you. So hopefully, they slide by, for the most part.
Just like those fancy chapeaus that you have back there.
That's right. Yeah, I'm just sneaking them in there. I notice, if I hover my head, like, I can pretend to try on my little hats. But yeah,
And
I'm still in.
I can like swipe the screen and like move it to the next hat.
Yeah, that's right.
No, I want the avatar to wear that one.
I'm working on the. It's a slow process to update the office, and so I'm working on it. Anyway, what are you drinking these days? We should talk about the pertinent data for this podcast. Coffee. So you've got
Well, I think in episode 195, I mentioned like that I needed to go get some Grackle to
mhm.
to sort of do a palate cleanse, and that has been acquired, and it is quite refreshing.
Excellent. Excellent. Well, I do like the Grackle too. So
What about yourself? And that's an Austin original, folks. So yeah.
I think we did take an impromptu trip down to Florida a week or so ago around spring break, just a few days, and I think I saw a Grackle, the bird, since I think they're a little more southern, right? Down by you. Probably, hopefully, I could be wrong, but Danielle, I think, corroborated that it was a Grackle. So, we don't have them up here in Michigan.
Or is a Grackle on vacation in Florida? So,
probably so. And so
like
for me,
like more like an invasion than vacation. So,
and so in my mug has been Kalamazoo Coffee Company, which is on the west side of the state. Oh no, what happened? Okay, sorry about that. My screen just went blank, but it's back. So good old technology. But yeah, Kalamazoo's kind of like over here, over there on the side of the state. And I was in Kalamazoo recently for not that high, Jamie, down here. I was down in Kalamazoo for there you go. You're closer. For AI Michigan board meeting, and so when in Rome or when in Kalamazoo, and I think its flavor is called the Backpackers Blend, I believe, and so something like that. So it's pretty good. It's kind of like a medium roast, morning style, a morning cup of coffee. So pretty good. Can't complain. I was gifted for my anniversary some coffee from Puerto Rico, like not the stuff you find on the shelf. Like this is Puerto Rican roasted coffee that I can't wait to open up. So there's that. It's on deck. On deck. So
well, you had been manifesting that, like you've been like manifesting that for a while.
I know.
So I'm glad that that came to be.
Yeah, and Danielle, must have been listening. So I'm excited. I'll let you know, and we'll perhaps I could share some with you. So have coffee will travel. So hopefully we'll I guess we're still may be dealing with a little bit of a lag. So we'll just talk like there is no lag and pray to the AI edit gods that it will fix the glitch in the matrix. Right? I see you nodding, so I'm hoping that you're on board for this adventure.
This is the way that Kurt tries to just, describe the battle that's inside us all with this AI, and how efficient it's going to make us all, and how happy like the AI overlords want all this to make us so that we can be docile and happy and efficient, even though there's a level of wonder and confusion sometimes that results. And then and then you're forced to drink more coffee. So yeah, there's that. Or sketch. So let's sketch and talk.
All right. All right then. So for today, here's what we got. This is Dallas City Hall, if I'm not mistaken. In the background, I guess we're not quite foregrounded, but on the sort of 2-page spread sketch, I was intrigued because I think your depiction on the left, is that a sort of represent, like an adaptation of like a Banksy piece of art with these
Yes.
chimpanzees, or are they gorillas, or are they monkeys
Monkey.
pushing the plunger?
Yeah.
The detonator of they do have that sort of Banksy vibe to them. But what is nice about the sketch, just from a visual, is the heavy line work. Well, it's almost like it's not really just lines. I mean, it's like the rendering of the monkeys with a lot of dark ink, like the Sharpie broke and leaked all over the page. And then, as opposed to your other more familiar styling of thinner line work with poche hatch and and a little bit of poche, like how Dallas City Hall is rendered, and many of your other sketches. And I would love to see you do a little more of these sort of blotchy, heavier ink, because it'd be kind of neat to see. I don't really know how you did. You might tell me how you executed that, but it's kind of in contrast with the building sketch in the back. It's really cool, because it really helps pop into the foreground, and regardless of the subject matter, which you might describe a little bit of too, I'm sure. But I was drawn to this because of the sort of contrast, I suppose. Yeah. Oh yeah. Which is, I guess, which is also alludes to the styling of Banksy's artwork, or a theme of artwork, right? With these sort of silhouettes and shadow, right? I guess that's kind of the represent creates this sort of shadowy figure, I guess, right? Simple. Plus, I imagine a lot of these become stencils, right? Which then turn into graffiti art. And so it changes the way you would render or draw something, right? Versus a pen sketch, pen and ink, or pencil and pen, So yeah. So what's the what's the story?
Yeah, no, for sure. It's and I appreciate your sort of, analysis of the foreground background intent with the sketchbook. It's always sort of tricky, when you're trying to render something that is architectural yet at the same time, like in the sketchbook, treated like artwork, or that has sort of the medium as the message kind of concept. And I think here was trying to lean into sort of my angstiness as an artist, and just general, persona. But I thought it was sort of appropriate, and I hadn't seen necessarily a great deal of art or um, um, critique that sort of was in this sort of vein for this particular event. I know it's something that you and I have been talking about a little bit. Brian Pay's City Hall in Dallas, 1977, Pritzker Prize winner, AIA gold medalist, very important brutalist building in the U.S. and in Pay's portfolio of kind of amazing works. bursts on the scene as a really signature piece of architecture in Dallas in the 70s, quite literally because the city was trying to reinvent itself and reinvent its brand, as a term we would use today. It wasn't necessarily using it then, but I think it relates. Is that you had a president of the United States shot, assassinated on the streets of Dallas, that shook the entire country, shook the world for that matter. But in the lead up to that, Dallas was not necessarily a place that the president welcomed. There was a lot of sort of protests and anxiety over that particular visit for him, historically speaking. But still, a relatively popular president, young president, and shot, and in a very, very public way, that was televised, that everybody experienced. And so Dallas, the city of Dallas, because it was in downtown when it happened, and the architecture and the space around it, really succumbed to this sort of feeling of how that city was associated with that event and would be associated with that event moving forward. So I think the city leaders were looking for opportunities, frankly, to try and change some of that narrative. And one of them was the new city hall. They wanted to be progressive. They wanted to, hire, one of the best architects in the world. All the things that, are available to you in that sort of situation as a seat of government, right? We have to do this thing. Let's do it right. Let's be ambitious. Let's engage the community. And all these things. And in this particular case, you get this brutalist building that has evokes sort of pro and con, and critique of it, just like that style has it persisted as sort of a critique in the public sphere. But in this particular case, city of Dallas has been contemplating demoing, razing this building, completely demoing it. And the controversy is not just in the fact that it's arguably a landmark, but also sort of the not necessarily underhanded, but sort of mysterious dealings that have sort of led to this moment, at least from the public reporting, and then sort of all things surrounding it. A lot of deferred maintenance on a building like this, just like there is with every building, of this sort of age. It's about 50 years old. But a lot of studies had been done on what to do with this building, and sort of reporting had sort of said that there was certain costs associated with this to make the appropriate upgrades, all these types of things, a few years ago. And then suddenly those estimates were basically inflated to a crazy amount, talking about $1 billion, to actually upgrade this building and make it useful. Whereas before, we were talking about in the less than $10 million, kind of ballpark, and where you could still, this isn't a building that you can't occupy. This is a building that is full and being occupied and being used, and is in the center of Dallas. So all that to say, lots of controversy, and not necessarily one that has an easy answer for a lot of folks. However, the proposal that was on the table, and that sort of caused my reaction as well as other architects, in Dallas, even preservationists like myself and others, is the city wants to move into an office tower. And so they're going to demo this building, potentially gift it to developers through, some deal or sort of increment, financing or, something, so that this site could be redeveloped by other parties. And so the city still has to pay the bill on, the office tower, which an office tower isn't necessarily the public realm. It isn't sort of the public plaza. It isn't that type of facility, regardless of which office tower they pick or which site that they pick. It's also going to move it out of this part of downtown. And the architecture community kind of rallied around it and sort of started to, kind of raise these questions and ask these questions of this building. And so, in you know, and with that, there's been, city council, members who have noted that they haven't been included in some of these real estate dealings. So, some people say that the fix was in and all these other things,
Hmm.
but the images that are here are sort of a montage of, what Banksy would do, sort of raising the question and sort of talking about the irreverence of this act, but also sort of, to provoke, an image to kind of provoke the conversation. Um, the image of the monkey with the plunger, kind of in the, Acme brick, or not Acme brick, Acme, Roadrunner and
Hmm.
kind of, plunger of
Yep.
dynamite, with bananas bananas strapped to it, by the way, right?
Yeah,
So,
I saw
not
that. Yeah.
not trying to talk about violence here, folks. So it yeah, so it's a monkey detonator. So this monkey detonator was actual piece that appeared as a stencil, which is the style of the sketch that I was trying to evoke, sort of a painterly quality. So switched pens. This is one where you do the outline like you're creating the stencil, kind of work on the inside in that sort of very, very dark tone, but do it in a way where it it feels like it's painted on the page, like there's almost brush strokes or, aerosol, kind of aerosol art kind of across the stencil. Um, and then below it, added a second monkey, sort of a dogs playing poker monkey. Um, and it's, there's some casino chips there. And so again, people kind of questioning who these developers are and what other ties do they have to other things and what their pocketbook already says about them. So trying to, through, call it a political cartoon, um, call it a caricature, call it an architectural critique. But yeah, this is where that sketch sort of lands. And as you're saying, there's a book in the background. So thanks to my daughter for a very, very generous Christmas gift on, collected works of Banksy along some themes. So
Well, that's cool. The gift is fantastic. And I know, I mean, I know you're a big fan of Banksy. Now, there's two interesting things that I think. Well, one is I am Pei, right? I mean, I'm familiar with the build. I think we've talked about a different kind of sketch of this building before, or at least we've talked about it because, um,
with Robocop.
yeah, right. Yeah, I thought there's the RoboCop tie-in, which is the Detroit Dallas, kind of scenery tie-in, but also so we're taking the whole studio, so the 53 students across our senior studio to Columbus, Indiana tomorrow for the weekend. And leading up to that, yesterday I presented the county library building in Columbus that was done by Pei in 19, I think it was 69, somewhere around there. So it's a little before this, but it was smaller. And I know you mentioned that offline that you told me that you've been to Columbus before, so I think you're familiar with the how downtown Columbus, kind of Indiana, not Columbus, Ohio, Indiana, came together through the Cummins Foundation, curating a selection of a short list of architects that were compensated by Cummins, and then creating cultural buildings around downtown Columbus, Indiana. And so I'm excited. I've actually driven right through Columbus, Indiana, and didn't stop. And so I'm excited to go down tomorrow with the students. I've been trumping it up, talking about it a lot with the students, and they almost are getting annoyed by how much I'm excited about this trip. But the Pei Library, it's a very simple, smaller building. It's obviously a lot smaller than this, but also masonry, a little bit on the brutalist side, but much lower scale. But what's nice about it, it's a lot of brick veneer, but then brick in the the plaza surface too, and creating this sort of these nice sort of gentle steps up to the front of the library. So it's really interesting to see the a little bit of comparison with Pei's work, but I've always been kind of a fan of a lot of his projects. They're always very well detailed, and they're very um, thoughtfully proportioned, and so I'm excited to see that. And then the other thing I was thinking about is this sort of era of time, this period of time of, say, even civic buildings like your Dallas City Hall here, and even locally here in Flint. We have some building. Our city hall is sort of seeing some demo by neglect, or deferred maintenance, right? And so it's not brutalist. It's a little more mid-century. But it's interesting how these things are aging, and how there's this sort of mixed bag of, like, do you uphold do you try and preserve these things, or do you sort of wipe the slate clean again and start over, right? And as your sketch is sort of alluding to, is like, well, you want to take it down, like, here's how you take it down, like, put the push the plunger, blow the dynamite.
Well, and I think that that's the whole thing in a particular case like this. It's um, you know, there's a lot of embodied energy in that concrete, and and that's the crazy part, is that they've even produced estimates of how much it will cost to just demo this building. And then when you start to think about, all we're doing is spending money to demo something, and we're talking in the millions to demo this, um, that we could have spent money to you know deal with the maintenance of. um, there's it starts to spark a different thread of conversation, and they're right now, the city is continuing this debate. The city council is continuing this debate on this particular building and sort of what its fate may be. um, and even if it ends up being something that ends up being landmarked and reused, or reimagined as a different site, with the building as it is, but sort of a reimagined on the interior, etc. Um, but yeah, I think it's great for your students to be thinking about these sort of moments that maybe even be happening in other parts of the country or other parts of the world, with connecting these interesting dots, right? I think that's the whole thing, that Columbus, as a there was a level of patronage, for it's the John Deere company, right? So it's like it's a bunch of tractors, that's where the money's coming from. And so the you have people who sort of associate their hometown, or kind of where they're from, with wanting to give back. And in the Columbus's case, in quite an imaginative and very successful way, from what I understand, and then one that continues. So it's a beautiful place to go. Hopefully you will encourage your students to do a little bit of sketching, in addition to just the photography, and the exploration. But as an architecture junkie, yeah, that's one of the spots that is stateside, that everybody really needs to experience, because it's not all kind of one type of architecture. It's different eras too, which I think is sort of remarkable, and continues to this day, where they're bringing in architects of the time, to do these kinds of these projects, and I think it's really kind of an interesting place. I was looking for my book on it, before we hopped on, but I just didn't have enough time. I think it's upstairs. So yeah, it's a great spot. I think you're going to have a great time, and I hopefully this connection to this was sort of interesting. I thought that you wanted to talk about this because there's been some news this past week or so, where um, rumor has it, if you've read the articles, if you've done the, cat on the internet, Banksy's been, unmasked. So,
Oh, I did see a headline about that and thought kind of dismissed it a little bit, but yeah, we should try and unravel that a little bit, maybe if there's more news that comes out in the next week or so, or maybe you can prepare a little bit of a yarn map.
I can do the yarn map. I
We-
mean, that's it's it's my turn. My turn to do the yarn map. My angsty,
exactly.
self.
And
So yeah.
yeah, but the and yeah, with the just what was the one other thing is, yeah, with the students, I was gonna say also is I've also been teasing them about be prepared to see their professors, like, touch buildings all as architects like to do, put, caress the materials
Oh,
of the building,
I mean, it's funny. It's I wasn't going to mention it a minute ago, but I will now because you just said that. Is when I was teaching at Prairie View, my students absolutely thought I was a crazy person because I took them to Dallas. Okay, apparently before I taught at Prairie View, the only place the students ever were allowed to go was Houston. Now, admittedly, that was a short car ride, but they never really went to like other cities in Texas.
Mhm.
I ended up being the first prof to take them out of state, as a proper, study abroad. But all that to say is we went to Dallas and then we also went to Fort Worth, sort of two different trips. And so in the Dallas trip, we went to the Morton H. Meyerson building, the Symphony Hall in Dallas is also IMPay.
Yeah.
Now, in that sort of collection of buildings, you have the Nasher Sculpture Garden. You also have Norman Foster doing a theater center, and then Opera House, and then across the street from that you have Rex and OMA doing another theater center, and then further down you have the Dallas Arts Magnet where Erica Badu and all those went to high school, which now has had an expansion by the folks out of Portland, David Clofell. I forget what their firm is.
Oh, I know the name that you're trying to say.
CLOE.
Yeah.
Yeah, I'm like, bad pronunciation. Amazing project.
I wouldn't know how to do it better.
And all this stuff is Yeah, all this is park the car and you can see like all of those buildings, with a very easy walk. And then you have the Dallas Museum of Art at sort of the tail end of it, which is now going through a renovation. If you get adventurous, you can walk a little further to the east and you can get to Ricardo Legaretta's Latin American Cultural Center. So all that to say is when Dallas built this city hall, they didn't have any of that stuff, right? And to me, there's a moment and there's a reason why Dallas has some of those things. It's because I think the patronage of good art, good architecture, as much as Dallas has gotten a bunch of other things wrong, their arts district is amazing. And I think that I would even venture to argue that the arts district doesn't happen if City Hall doesn't happen. Maybe that's me, that's my hot take, but I think it goes it speaks to what you and your students are going to experience in Columbus, where some people had a little bit of a vision. They didn't necessarily know the buildings they were going to get. They knew who they were going to try and hire, but they didn't know what the buildings they were going to get, and they didn't know what the add-on effect was.
Right.
And some things that going there you get to experience, and I think that's the value add for the students. Can look at the photos, list off the names of the architects, familiarize themselves with the buildings, but going to a place and experiencing it, um, and then thinking through, how did they get to this point? That's interesting. And you can still critique it. It doesn't all have to be perfect, right? But it's certainly something to learn from and be influenced by.
Yeah, thanks. I will add that to our on-site conversation, and hopefully do a little inspiration. But yeah, having this clustering of artifacts, within walkable distance is a lucky sort of situation to be in. And actually, on the way down, we're going to stop at Saarinen Concordia University in Fort Wayne, and so a little bonus side quest.
So here's the thing. As much as you're going to touch these buildings, and Kurt's going to touch them, he's going to touch all of them, folks. There is a building in Texas. So when you come to Texas, if we end up being north on maybe one of your visits, I might, if you're really nice, I might take you to Grand Saline, Texas, where you're allowed to lick the building. You're actually not allowed. You're better word. You're encouraged. You're encouraged to lick the building because the building is made of salt.
Uh-huh.
So there is
That's
that.
a new one. I like that.
I've not licked the building. That just does not appeal to me. But fun fact.
It's a bit salty. Well,
they built the city on a salt dome. So.
Oh, okay. We could go on. I like these little anecdotal things. Should try and tie them all together one day. But yeah, thanks. And we hopefully, if you can spare the time, I might try and virtually bring you into Columbus over the weekend. See if we can do that. So fingers crossed. But I know you have a footy match, right? A football match to make it to. So we won't overburden your weekend with the architectural spelunking, as I call it.
You could just get me on the march. Just get me on the march to the match. I'm just like, do it from the phone. It'd be all good.
Yeah, that sounds good. All right, sir. Well, thanks for a quick episode. As we approach 200, we've got a few more to go, and then we're there. So it's always fun.